Question number 1. Remember that the strategy is to focus on the subject and the verb and identify modifiers. Okay? Be very careful with modifiers. In this particular question, you're starting with a prepositional phrase. In a review of 2000 studies of human behavior that date back to the 1940s, that's my modifier. Then you have a subject, 2 Swiss psychologists. And what is the verb? Okay, so you have a subject, but we have a problem because declaring is not a verb. Declaring all the way down to size is a modifier as well. It's a present participle modifier that describes psychologists. If we do a quick split, it will focus on the differences among the answer choices, and we'll notice that number 1, number 2 begin with, or they use a present participle instead of a verb. On the other hand, the last 3 answer choices use the verb declared. So we can eliminate 1 and 2 because they are lacking a verb. And we have 3 options left, number 3, 4, and 5. What's next? Let's keep looking at other differences. For example, at the end we are using such like versus such as. You also have such variables like or such as again. Remember that such like does not exist. Okay? You cannot use such like, it's not idiomatic. Eliminate number 4. We need to use such as to give examples. Okay, we're between 3 and 5. Now, be very careful with subordinated subjects. For example, the word sense is subordinating the subject most of the studies. Most of the studies, and you need a verb. Having failed looks like a verb, but it is a modifier. Okay, and we call that modifier the perfect gerund. Okay, we'll see more about the perfect gerund in the modifiers lesson. Then in the 4th one, which is wrong, we have since again. That's my subordinator. You have the subject most of the studies and the verb failed. And in the last one, you have the same subordinator, the subject most of the studies and the verb had failed. Well, I cannot use having failed. The answer has to be E. I also need to use the past perfect had failed because this action occurred before another action. It happened before they declared. Okay? So if you have any question about this, about question number 1, feel free to email me at verbal@gmadudes.com. Question number 2. Remember, the strategy is to find the subject, the main subject, and the main verb. Also, be careful with modifiers, which are usually between commas. Sometimes they start the sentence, sometimes they're in the middle, and sometimes they're at the end. So we will work hard to identify those modifiers. My subject here is efforts. Efforts to equalize the funds available to school districts. Okay, to equalize all the way down to the comma is a prepositional phrase. Then you have a modifier between commas. A major goal of education reformers in many states in the 1970s is a modifier. Get rid of it. So we have the subject and we need the verb. What is the verb? Well, it's right after the comma, has. Okay, so efforts has not significantly reduced the gaps existing between the richest and the poorest districts. Focus on the splits. Look at some differences at the beginning. Usually, here we have the singular has versus the plural have. Okay, which one do you prefer? Well, if you have a plural subject, we need a plural verb. I cannot use the singular has. So it's either number 4 or number 5. There are other differences as well. Efforts have not significantly reduced. Significantly reduced versus have not been significant in a reduction. Now focus on the last structure. This is worthy. You're using more words than you need. In addition, the last one changes the meaning dramatically. Why? Well, because significantly needs to modify reduced. In the last one, significant is an adjective, and significant is describing the efforts. You're saying that the efforts have not been significant, and that's wrong. They have not been significantly reduced. It's a completely different idea. So we're going to keep number 4 for 2 reasons. It keeps the meaning, the original meaning, which is in number 1, significantly reduced. And second, it is simpler, more concise. Okay? Now there is a common pattern in the GMAT. You'll notice throughout these lessons that a lot of right answers prefer to use a verb or a verbal form, such as reduced, rather than a noun, okay, such as reduction. So reduced is a verbal form. Reduction, a reduction is a noun. And you'll notice that in general, the structures that use verbs are shorter, more concise than those that use nouns. Okay? So eliminate the last one. The best choice is number 4. If you have any question, feel free to contact me. You can email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 3. Remember that we need to focus on the subject and the verb, okay? So find the subject, identify modifiers, okay, find the verb, and then do the splits. The subject here is diabetes, right? Together with the serious complications is a modifier between commas. You can't get rid of it. Diabetes, what is a verb? It's right after the modifier. Again, diabetes ranks as the nation's 3rd leading cause of death, comma, surpassed only by heart disease and cancer. That last part, surpassed only, is also a modifier, okay? So diabetes ranks, that's the main clause. Focus on the splits now. Ranks, rank, has the rank, are, have been ranked. They're all different. Now we know that diabetes is singular, right? Remember that names of illnesses such as diabetes and rabies, okay, are always singular. So you can eliminate some answer choices here. Diabetes singular, I cannot use the plural rank, eliminate number 2. Are and have are also wrong. Okay, those 3 choices are wrong. We are between 1 and 3. Now which one is better? Which one would you keep? Well, there are a couple of things. First, ranks is 1 word versus has the rank is 3 words. Now it is not idiomatic to say that diabetes has the rank. Diabetes doesn't have anything, okay? In addition, as we mentioned in question 1 and 2, the GMAT generally prefers verbs to nouns. And notice that ranks is a verb, while the rank is a noun. So when the GMAT uses nouns rather than verbs, the structure is worthier, longer. Then you have another split, surpassed only versus only surpassed. Now in general, avoid the word only next to a verb or verbal form, okay? Avoid that. The shortest and most concise expression is number one. If you have any question, please feel free to email me at verbal@gmatdudes.com. Question number 4. Again, focus on finding the subject and the verb. Okay? There is always a main subject and a main verb. If there isn't, then there is something wrong. For example, here, the subject is the intricate structure of the compound insect eye. The intricate structure, that's the subject of the compound insect eye, is a prepositional phrase. Then you have a modifier between commas. Having hundreds of miniature eyes called omnatidia is a modifier. And then you have a verb. So the structure, help. The structure help explain why scientists have assumed that it evolved independently of the vertebrate eye. Let's focus on some splits. I found a mistake. The structure is singular, but the verb help is plural. So let's focus on the split right here. Help, helps, helps, help, helps. So eliminate all the plural verbs. Help is wrong, help is wrong. Number 1 and 4 cannot be the answer. We have 3 options left. Okay? 2, 3, and 5. So let's focus on some other differences. You have having, with, that's one split. Yeah, that's one difference. Then you have the pronoun they, it. Okay, so the structure helps explain why scientists have assumed that they. It cannot be they, because they is plural, and I'm talking about the structure of the compound insect eye. Okay, so in fact, for this to make sense, it has to be the compound insect eye evolved independently of the vertebrate eye. Yeah, because the comparison has to be logical. I need to compare insect eye with vertebrate eye. I cannot use they because they is plural. I need it. You can eliminate answer choices 2 and 3. Okay, so at the end we end up with the structure, the intricate structure of the compound insect eye with its hundreds of miniature eyes called omnatidia helps explain why scientists have assumed that it evolved independently of the vertebrate eye. Okay? By the way, the prepositional phrase with its hundreds of miniature eyes called omnatidia refers to the compound insect eye. Okay, it's modifying that. If you have any question, feel free to email me at verbal@gmatdudes.com. Question number 5. Apply the strategy. Remember, find the subject and the verb. Sometimes you have modifiers in between. Okay? In this question, for example, you're starting with the modifier native to South America. Native to South America is a modifier that describes what? When peanuts were introduced to Africa by Portuguese explorers early in the 16th century, they were quickly adopted into Africa's agriculture, probably because of being so similar to the Bambara groundnut, a popular indigenous plant. Native to South America has to describe peanuts. peanuts were introduced has to be the verb. The problem is that the subject peanuts is subordinated. It is subordinated by the word when. Yeah? So when peanuts were introduced is not really a sentence. And if you look at the splits at the beginning, you'll notice that answer choice A is the only one that starts with when. My subject must be peanuts. Then find the verb. Okay, we have 4 answer choices left, and there are many differences. Having been introduced versus were introduced versus comma introduced comma introduced. And if you focus on those 4 splits, the only possible choice is letter C. Why? Because having been is not a verb. It's a modifier that we call, I'm going to write it here, the perfect gerund. So the perfect gerund is a modifier. I cannot pick B. Were introduced is a verb. And the last 2, be careful because they look like verbs. However, introduced is not a verb. It is a past participle modifier. It is a modifier. We call them past participles. Okay? Introduced describes the noun before the comma. Peanuts. I cannot pick the last 2. And there are other differences. For example, at the end you have the split between because of being, okay, because of being versus because they were. And the answer must be because they were. So letter 3 is the best choice. Because of being is not idiomatic. You cannot have because of plus an ing. Okay? That is not idiomatic. After because of, you can have a noun. Okay? Not a verb ing. Okay, so if you have any question, feel free to email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 6. Focus on the subject and the verb. Okay? The main subject and the main verb. Then identify modifiers. Sometimes you may have subordinated subjects and verbs, okay? Like in this question. Take a look at the beginning here. Many psychologists and sociologists, that's the main subject. Now content, and that's the main verb. A lot of times when you have a verb plus the word that, the word that becomes a subordinator of another subject and verb. In this particular case, that is subordinating the subject, the deliberate and even brutal aggression. The deliberate and even brutal aggression, integral to some forms of competitive athletics, increase. Increase is the verb of the deliberate and even brutal aggression. The question is that subject plural or singular? Be careful because this word and is connecting 2 modifiers. Deliberate and brutal are modifiers that describe the noun aggression. So here the true subject is aggression. So the aggression increase. However, aggression is singular and increase is plural. That's why I cannot pick 1, 2, or 3. My answer has to be either number 4 or number 5. By the way, between aggression and increase there is a modifier. Okay? Integral to some forms of competitive athletics is a modifier. Okay, so we have 2 left. focus on other differences. And here the main differences are likelihood for violence to erupt versus likelihood that violence will erupt. So this becomes an idiomatic issue. And the right answer is E. Why? Well, because likelihood for something to does not exist. It's not idiomatic. It's wrong. Likelihood needs the word that plus a subject plus a verb in the future. Okay? Likelihood dot subject plus verb in the future. That is the correct idiom. We eliminate number 4, and E is my best choice. If you have any question, email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 7. Again, focus on the main subject and verb, modifiers, and be careful with subordinated subjects and verbs. In this question, the subject is Schlippentag study. So the study indicated, that's the main verb. And again, if you have a verb plus the word that, okay, the word that will subordinate another subject and verb. Indicated that, get rid of the modifier between commas. And the subject is women's absenteeism. So women's absenteeism from their jobs, get rid of the modifier between commas again. Okay, get rid of that. Despite their home duties and their childcare responsibilities is out. So women's absenteeism where? Be careful, because absenteeism is singular and where is plural. Eliminate 1 and 2. So absenteeism was only a fifth of men's. You're omitting the word absenteeism, that's okay. Was only a fifth of men. That's wrong because you're comparing absenteeism to a fifth of men. Was a fifth only of that of the men. Okay, be careful, that structure is worthy. Okay, this is worthy because it uses more words than what you need. And to keep parallelism, focus on the possessive noun here. Women's absenteeism is more parallel to men's absenteeism. We'll see more about parallelism and comparisons in the following lessons. The best choice here is number 3 because it uses the singular was and it compares women's absenteeism to men's absenteeism. Okay? If you have any question, email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 8. Again, focus on the subject and the verb. Okay? Identify modifiers and be very careful with subordinated subjects and verbs. Here, you're starting with a modifier. According to scientists at the University of California, what happened? The pattern of changes that have occurred in human DNA over the millennia indicate. That's the main verb. The pattern indicate. Be careful with the prepositional phrase of changes, which is a modifier. Be careful with the relative clause that have occurred in human DNA over the millennia. That's another modifier. Okay? So the pattern indicate is the main clause. Indicate the possibility that everyone alive today might be descended from a single female ancestor who lived in Africa sometime between 140,000 and 280,000 years ago. Did you see the mistake? Well, the pattern is singular, right? And the verb should also be singular. Indicate is plural. Focus on the splits. You have indicate in number 2, may indicate in number 3, and indicates in the last 2. you can easily eliminate 1, 2, and be careful with number 3 because the position of may changes the meaning. You want may be or might be descended, not may indicate. Well, another thing is, you can eliminate this one. Between the last two, there are some important differences. The first one is may be a descendant of versus might be a descendant from. And this becomes an idiomatic issue. First, when you use the noun descendant, you need a specific preposition. Descendant cannot go with from. You could descend from, when descent is a verb, but a descendant, which is a noun, needs the preposition of. So that's an idiom. Descendant of versus descend from. Another thing is, you're talking about today, and this is interesting. The word might is the simple past of the present may. Since I'm talking about today, I need the simple present may. I cannot use the past might. Keep that in mind. And the best choice is number 4. If you have any question, please email me at verbal@gmail.com. Have fun. I'll see you soon. Question number 9. Remember to focus on the subject, the main subject and the main verb first. Then identify modifiers and subordinated constructions. My subject here is the themes. So the themes that Rita Dove explores in her poetry, that's a modifier, it's a relative clause. And the main verb is this one. So the themes is universal. You cannot pick a singular verb because the themes is plural. You need are universal. So we have 3 left. Then take a look at number 3 and 5 because they are both run-on sentences. Remember that a run-on sentence is a mistake. It's a frequent mistake that occurs when you combine 2 main clauses, subject plus verb, comma, subject plus verb. You cannot connect 2 main clauses, 1 and 2, using just a comma. The themes are universal, comma, they encompass. The same thing happens in E. They encompass. They is a subject, encompass is a verb, and those are wrong. That's why the best choice is number 4. So the themes are universal, encompassing much of the human condition while occasionally dealing with racial issues. Encompassing is a modifier. It's a modifier that describes the noun before the comma. Well, in this case, not the noun, it describes the entire clause. Encompassing is describing the themes are universal. That verb ing is explaining why they are universal. So we'll see more about modifiers in another lesson. Just remember that when you have the structure subject plus verb, comma, verb ing, the verb ing modifier could be either a consequence or an explanation of the entire clause. Keep that in mind. Have fun, and I'll see you soon. Question number 10. Focus on the subject and the main verb. Then be very careful with modifiers and subordinated structures. Okay, that is a strategy. Here my subject is a search. Okay, a search. Then you have a prepositional phrase, which is a modifier. A search in new home sales and a drop. Oh, look, that's a compound subject. So a surge in new home sales and a drop in weekly unemployment claims suggest. The main verb is suggest. A surge and a drop suggest that the economy might not be as weak as some analysts previously thought. Okay, so focus on the split at the beginning. Suggest, suggests, suggest, suggesting, suggesting. We've seen a similar split before. Okay? Since you want a plural verb, you can eliminate number 2. It cannot be suggests. And you can eliminate the last 2 because suggesting is not a verb. It's a present participle modifier. Yeah? Suggesting is a modifier, it's not a verb. Eliminate the last 2. You are between A and C. Now, what differences do you see between those 2? Well, take a look at the following structure. You have might not be as weak as some analysts thought versus might not be as weak as have been previously thought by analysts. Notice how wordy the third one is. Okay, it is wordy because it's called a passive construction. It's the passive voice. Okay, it is passive because the subject, analysts, is not really performing the action directly, as opposed to the first one. Analysts thought. So the analysts are doing the thinking. The first one is called the active voice. And in general, we prefer active because it creates a simpler, more concise expression. Okay? Eliminate the third one and keep number 1. That's the best choice. If you have any question, email me at verbal@gmail.com. Thank you. Question 11. Focus on finding the main subject and verb, then identify modifiers, and you could also focus on subordinated structures. Okay? This particular question begins with a prepositional phrase. With its plan to develop 7.5 acres of shoreland. Okay, that's a modifier. Then we have subject. Cleveland is, that's my verb. Cleveland is but one of a large number of communities on the Great Lakes that is looking to its waterfront as a way to improve the quality of urban life and attract new businesses. So, interesting. Take a look at this particular phrase. That is looking to its waterfront. Okay. That is looking, what is that describing? Is it the Great Lakes or the community on the Great Lakes? Well, the lakes cannot be looking, right? So you need a number of communities, which by the way is, what is it, plural or singular? A number of is always plural, always plural. Okay, so you can say that the communities are looking. I cannot pick the singular is. So the communities are looking to versus looking at, that's another split. Then you have the plural pronoun there versus the singular eats. Since I'm referring back to the communities on the Great Lakes, I cannot use the singular eats. Eliminate number 4. So you have 3 and 5 left. Are looking to their waterfronts versus are looking at the waterfronts. Now, look at means to observe, to watch. And the communities are not watching other waterfronts as a way. They are looking to the waterfronts to improve. Okay? That's why we eliminate number 5. They are not observing the waterfronts. They are trying to do something. They are attempting to do something. They want to improve the quality of urban life and attract new businesses. The best choice was number 3. Okay, remember that looking to has a different meaning. For example, when I say, I'm looking forward to meeting with you. Okay, versus looking at is to watch. Okay, look at me. Take a look at me. If you have any question, email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 12. Focus on the subject, the main verb, and you can also be aware with modifiers and subordinated structures. My subject here is discussion. Discussion of greenhouse effects, that's a modifier. Have, that's the main verb. So discussion have, usually had as a focus, the possibility of Earth growing warmer and to what extent it might, comma. But climatologists have indicated all along that precipitation, storminess, and temperature extremes are likely to have the greatest impact on people. So, since discussion is singular, okay, I cannot use the plural verb have. Eliminate number 1. In number 2 we have discussion has. Number 3, discussion has. Number 4, the discussion have. And number 5, the discussion has. Okay, eliminate 1 and 4 because have is plural. I need discussion, or maybe the discussion. What other differences do we see? Compare discussion has had as its focus versus the more concise expression has focused. Has focused. As we've seen in previous questions, focus is a noun, while focused is a verbal form, a past participle. And if you notice, in general, when you use a verb or a verbal form, you save a lot of words. Okay, you create more concise expressions. For that reason, I'm between 3 and 5. Now, what other differences do we see? In number 3 you have has usually focused on whether Earth would grow warmer and to what extent, versus E has usually focused on whether Earth would grow warmer and the extent that is. Okay, and the last one is wrong because it is not parallel. Focused on whether Earth would grow warmer and the extent that is. Okay, this is wrong, it's incomplete. It should be and to what extent. Okay, has focused on whether Earth would grow warmer and to what extent. The third one is the best choice, simpler, more concise. Okay? If you have any question, you can email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 13. Focus on finding the subject, the main verb, the modifiers, and subordinated constructions. This question begins with a noun phrase. a huge reptile that died out with the dinosaurs some 65 million years ago, comma, the Quetzalcoatlus had a wingspan of 36 feet, believed to be the largest flying creature the world has ever seen. Be careful here because the structure at the beginning is not a subject, it is a modifier that we call noun phrase modifier. It is a long modifier. The subject is the Quetzalcoatlus. So the Quetzalcoatlus, and the main verb is had. The Quetzalcoatlus had a wingspan of 36 feet. Believed to be the largest flying creature the world has ever seen. Be careful with believed to be. It's not a verb, it's a past participle modifier. And as a modifier, it needs to describe a noun. So it should be next to the Quetzalcoatlus, not next to a wingspan of 36 feet. That's why eliminate number 1. I need to refer back to the subject, to the Quetzalcoatlus. You have some options here, and that, and it, which. As we will learn in modifiers, which describes the noun that is before the comma. A noun or a noun phrase before the comma. So you have a noun, comma, which structure, and this modifier will describe the noun before the comma. So a wingspan of 36 feet, which was the largest creature. No, because the wingspan of 36 feet cannot be a creature. The same thing happens in the last one. So you gotta be between number 2 and 3. So if you want to refer back to the same subject, you need to use it, the pronoun it. That's why letter C is the best choice. Regarding that, okay, that refers to a copy of a noun mentioned before, and we'll see how that works, but in another lesson, okay? Now, something interesting is that when you have comma and, okay, open your eyes carefully. Be careful because comma and can connect two independent main clauses. You can have a subject plus a verb, comma and then you need another subject plus a verb. Okay, so a comma plus a connector such as and can connect clause number 1 with clause number 2. That's why after comma and you need a subject and a verb. It is believed to have been the largest flying creature the world has ever seen. You need the present perfect have been as well because you have the keywords the world has ever seen, which means that something started in the past until the present. In other words, the Quetzalcoatlus is the largest flying creature to ever have existed. Okay? If you have any question or doubt, email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question 14. Remember to focus on the subject and the main verb. Okay? Here the subject is inflation. So inflation in medical costs is a prepositional phrase, that's a modifier. Inflation slowed in 1986 for the 5th consecutive year, but were still about 50% greater than the rate of price increases for other items included in the Consumer Price Index. So you have two verbs here. Inflation slowed, but were 50% greater. You have a contrast and two verbs, two main verbs. Now, is inflation plural or singular? Well, it is singular. Therefore, I cannot use the plural verb were. Look at the split at the end. Were, They were? No. You can eliminate 1, 3, and 5. Okay, so we are between 2 and 4. Now be careful with number 4. In number 4 you are changing the subject. The subject is 1986 and the verb is was. 1986 was the 5th consecutive year in which inflation in medical costs slowed, but was still about 50% greater. And that's a problem because the subject is 1986. You're saying that 1986 was the 5th consecutive year and 1986 was about 50% greater. And that's wrong because inflation was 50% greater, not 1986. You eliminate number 4 and we stay with number 2. Okay? Be careful, sometimes you may have one subject and 2 verbs connected by a word such as but, and, or. Okay? If you have any doubt, email me at verbal@gmail.com. Question number 15. Focus on the subject and the verb, okay? Be careful with modifiers in between. For example, the subject here is neuroscientists. Then you have a modifier between commas, having amassed all the way down to adulthood. And then the main verb is are drawing. Neuroscientists are drawing. Okay? Then look at the differences here. Neuroscientists are versus neuroscientists and are. Number 3, neuroscientists amassing and are. Okay, be careful because 2 and 3 have a subject but they don't have a main verb. The modifier having amassed is called a perfect gerund. It is not a verb. Okay? Then you have amassing. Amassing is a present participle modifier as well. So in those 2 you do not have a verb. Now in the last 2 we are changing the meaning completely because we are altering the entire sentence by changing the verb. Neuroscientists have amassed. Neuroscientists have amassed. Okay? You have another subject and verb. You are not saying that neuroscientists are now drawing solid conclusions anymore. You are saying that they have amassed a wealth of knowledge. And then at the end you have comma followed by now drawing. Okay? You have now drawing. And now drawing should describe the neuroscientists. However, in the touch rule we know that a modifier needs to touch the noun it describes. And that's why the last 2 are wrong. They're wrong because now drawing solid conclusions is not describing neuroscientists. Okay? We keep the original sentence. Neuroscientists, having amassed a wealth of knowledge over the past 20 years about the brain and its development from birth to adulthood, are now drawing solid conclusions about how the human brain grows and how babies acquire language. Okay, so the perfect gerund can be used to express the cause of an effect. In other words, having amassed a wealth of knowledge is the cause of the effect, which is are now drawing solid conclusions. Okay, we keep A. If you have any question, email me at verbal@gmail.com.